Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Game of Thrones episodes updated for Season 5. So about a year ago, I did a top 10 episodes for Game of Thrones up through Season 4, and in that video I mentioned I probably wouldn't be doing an updated version until the end of the series. Well, I'm weak, I gave in and decided to do one updated for Season 5, and spoiler warning for the entire series up through Season 5. So last time I didn't do a bottom 5 least favorite list, which is what I tend to do when I do these top 10 videos. Instead, I named 5 honorable mentions. However, this time, to be different, I decided to do a bottom 5 least favorite list. But bear in mind that I don't think there's any such thing as a bad episode of Game of Thrones. My least favorite episodes, I would say, are average. Most bottom 5 lists I do have episodes that I give ratings 1 through 10 have ratings of 1 or 2, 1 being the worst. Even some of my favorite shows like Star Trek, Lost, and Breaking Bad, my 5 least favorite episodes will have ratings of 1 or 2. The show that had the best ratings with my least favorite episodes so far has been House MD, which had a bunch of 3s and 4s on my least favorite list. However, Game of Thrones bottom 5 has 5 and 6 on my list. My least favorite episode has a 5, which is an average rating. So I just want to make it clear, these episodes don't suck, they're just average. And because Game of Thrones is that good, that's the worst they got so far. So I'll start off with my number 5 least favorite episode, Second Sons, Season 3, Episode 8. Pros: Sam killing a White Walker, Daenerys sparring with the Second Sons. Cons: Sansa and Tyrion's wedding. Overall, there was nothing particularly wrong with this episode, but like most episodes in season 3, it dragged on for too long, took too long to get to the point, particularly with Sansa and Tyrion's wedding was far longer than it needed to be, filled with too many character building moments that was just filler. However, Sam's White Walker slaying almost had me leave this episode off the list entirely because it was so good. Number 4 is Kill the Boy, Season 5, Episode 5. Pros: Dany feeding her dragon's nobles, Jon making the hard decision to help the wildlings. Cons: Ramsay and Miranda being dicks in Winterfell. Overall, this episode seemed to drag on too long. Even the scenes at the wall and in Meereen, which overall were good, dragged on a bit longer than they needed to. But most of all was the Winterfell scenes, which I felt just fell apart and were failed attempts to show Miranda and Ramsay trying to manipulate Sansa, but it just felt weird and it didn't accomplish what they wanted it to. Number 3 is Breaker of Chains, Season 4, Episode 3. Pros: Daenerys' epic speech to the people of Meereen, Sansa's escape from King's Landing, Tywin schooling Tommen on how to be king. Cons: Jaime forcing himself on Cersei in front of Joffrey's corpse, Arya and the Hound dicking around at a farm, Sam dropping Gilly off at a whore town and thinking she'll be safe there, and a repetitive orgy scene with Oberyn. Overall, this episode, more than any episode on this list, is on this list because it had too many bad moments. Most episodes on this list are just here because they were too slow and dragged out a bit. Whereas this episode had many great moments, but unfortunately they were outnumbered by boring, poorly written, or just flat out bad moments mentioned above. Number 2 is Dark Wings, Dark Words, Season 3, Episode 2. Pros: Jaime fighting with Brienne and the witty introduction of Lady Olenna. Cons: the clunky introduction of Jojen and Mira and the pointless torture scenes with Theon. Overall, there was nothing in this episode that was particularly bad. It's more of this episode didn't have anything particularly interesting. The Lady Olenna scene, the fight with Jaime and Brienne, and the introduction of the Brotherhood without banners were all okay, but overall these episodes were just filled to the brim with pointless filler as we got more boring dreams from Bran, Arya and her friends bitching at each other, and too many dialogue scenes that just didn't go anywhere. And my number 1 least favorite episode of Game of Thrones is First of His Name, Season 4, Episode 5. Pros: the battle at Craster's Keep. Cons: Brienne bitching at Podrick, Arya and the Hound dicking around in the Riverlands again, Cersei unconvincingly trying to persuade the judges. Overall, there was nothing really bad in this episode, but it gets my number one least favorite spot because there was nothing really great either. The Crashers Keep stuff was good, but not spectacular, whereas all the scenes that came before it were just too much filler strung together. Some of the scenes, like the ones in the Eyrie and Danny deciding not to go to Westeros and Marine, weren't that bad, but there were just too many expositional dialogue and pointless and boring, unnecessary scenes, particularly Cersei trying to talk to Oberyn, which was just there to give Oberyn more screen time. And Arya and Hound stuff, which was entirely pointless. This episode, there was nothing really there to make it interesting to me, making it my number one least favorite episode. So now I'll get to my top 10 favorite episodes of Game of Thrones Season 1 through Season 5, starting with my number 10, The Mountain and the Viper, Season 4, Episode 8. Pros: Oberyn's epic fight with the Mountain, Sansa manipulating the Lords of the Eyrie, Jorah getting exiled by Dany, Ramsay getting legitimized, Arya laughing at her aunt's death. Cons: unnecessary romance scenes with Missandei and Grey Worm, Tyrion's pointless beetle speech. Overall, this episode contained some of the show's most celebrated and groundbreaking scenes, most notably the Mountain Oberyn fight to decide the fate of Tyrion, fan favorite. It had the kind of shocking ending that's a landmark of Game of Thrones, and the Sansa scene where she finally becomes a full-on player that made this episode particularly memorable. Number 9 is Valar Morghulis, Season 2, Episode 10. Pros: Daenerys getting her dragons back in the most epic way, and then locking up that so-called King of Qarth in his vault just like he deserved. Arya seeing Jake and Hagar changing faces. Robb Stark's secret wedding. Shay's romantic declaration to Tyrion. Maester Luwin's teary farewell, and the White Walker invasion. Cons: the burning of Winterfell, which had me so confused I was angry. Overall, a very solid finale that was held up with a strong conclusion to Daenerys' storyline, where she truly learns to become a strong, independent leader that she is for the rest of the series, as well as many other great ways to wrap up all the various storylines of Season 2, ending with the creepy march of the White Walkers. Number 8 is And Now His Watch Has Ended, Season 3, Episode 4. Pros: Daenerys buying an army of Unsullied with a dragon and then using both to sack Astapor, the rebellion at Cresser's Keep that cost the Lord Commander his life, the introduction of Beric Dondarrion, and Varys' Wizard in the Box. Cons: Joffrey gives Marjorie a tour of Baelor Sept, and Ramsay tricks Theon. Overall, most of the scenes in this episode weren't particularly good or bad, save for the two, the rebellion at Cresser's Keep and Dany's sacking of Astapor. The second one being one of the most epic moments in the entire series. That scene alone made this one of the greatest episodes of the series. Number 7 is You Win or You Die, Season 1, Episode 7. Pros: Ned's fails attempt to seize the Iron Throne, Cersei and Ned's courtyard discussion, Khal Drogo's declaration to take the Iron Throne after the failed assassination attempt on Daenerys, King Robert's farewell. Cons: Littlefinger's sexposition, Theon harassing Osha. Overall, this was the Crimson Tide of Game of Thrones, the one episode in the whole series where the Iron Throne was really up for grabs, and the whole intrigue was played so well and ended in a totally unexpected way for a TV series, and was nicely counterbalanced with Dany and Drogo declaring to take the throne, while at the Wall they were uncovering the mysteries of the Whites, which made clear while the Starks and Lannisters battled over the throne, fire and ice were coming as well. Number 6 is The Reigns of Castamere, Season 3, Episode 9. Pros: Robb, Catelyn, and Talisa's betrayal at the Red Wedding, the Hound saving Arya's life, Jon Snow's badass slaying of Orell and escape from the Wildlings, Bran warging into Hodor, Daenerys sacking Yunkai. Cons: the Lannisters defeat the Starks, yet again, getting a bit repetitive, and they killed off Robb Stark, the bastards. Overall, I have mixed feelings about the Red Wedding and the showrunner's choice to make it the centerpiece of season 3, but it was executed so brilliantly with amazing acting that made it probably the most tragic scene ever to air on television. And the first half of the episode disarmed you with humor from Walder Frey, making this deception even more shocking. And on top of that, we also got epic moments with Jon, Bran, and Dany. Number 5 is The Laws of Gods and Men, Season 4, Episode 6. Pros: Tyrion's epic speech at his trial, Davos going to bat for Stannis with the Iron Bank, the new small council in action, Daenerys dealing with the realities of being a queen. Cons: Yara's failed rescue of Theon just because Ramsay released some dogs. Overall, the trial scene was the most effective, suspenseful, well-acted dialogue scene of the whole series. Tyrion's epic speech, where he finally told off the people of King's Landing and demanded a trial by combat, was just so amazing. And it was all because Tywin overplayed his hand by turning Tyrion's own lover against him and pushed him over the edge. Number 4 is The Children, Season 4, Episode 10. Pros: Tyrion's escape from the prison where he found his lover and his father in his father's bed, so killed them both. Stannis' arrival at the north to defeat Mance Rayder's army. Bran being attacked by scary-looking wights while Jojen was killed, but he was saved by one of the Children of the Forest, and finally got to meet the Three-Eyed Raven. Cersei finally getting the better of her father by threatening to make her incestuous relationship public. Daenerys, tough choice to lock up her babies, and Arya finally using the coin Jaqen gave her to hitch a ride to Braavos. Cons: Brienne's fight with the Hound and Arya leaving the Hound for dead, making all the time we spent with them this season completely pointless. Overall, the episode was jam-packed with epic scene after epic scene, where every scene in this episode except one, which I just mentioned, was pure gold. And the ending, all storylines of Season 4 in the most satisfying and exciting ways imaginable. Number 3 is Hardhome, Season 5, Episode 8. Pros: Jon's epic battle with the White Walkers at Hardhome and seeing his negotiation skills in action with the Wildlings just before that. Tyrion finally meeting Daenerys and having a great convo. Sansa getting Theon to admit her brothers are still alive. Seeing Arya and her new identity prep for her first assignment. Cons: Ollie bitching to Sam about Jon's decision to help the Wildlings. Overall, the Hardhome sequence was absolutely amazing and set apart from every other battle scene in the show has been incredibly creepy, and it effectively got us attached to new characters that were killed off in the same episode, while getting us to root for a giant. And on top of that, we got an amazing dialogue scene with Dany and Tyrion verbally sparring, making this a truly unique and great episode. Number 2 is Blackwater, Season 2, Episode 9. Pros: Tyrion using wildfire to destroy Stannis' fleet, Tyrion verbally bitch-slapping Joffrey, the Hound and Bronn almost coming to blows, Tyrion's epic battle speech, the amazing montage that ended the episode where Cersei almost poisoned Tommen, but was stopped by her father coming to save the day. Cons: the scenes with Sansa hanging with the women and the scenes with her talking to the Hound. Overall, a breakthrough episode not just for Game of Thrones, but for all of TV, having a battle sequence so epic you'd expect to see it on a Lord of the Rings movie, and doing so in a nuanced way you'd come to expect from Game of Thrones, where both sides had their good and bad points. There were no true bad guys, there were no true good guys. So before I get to my number 1 favorite episode, I just want to mention a few other lists, because in many other reviews I heard people comparing the Season 5 finale to other finales, or Episode 9 to other Episode 9, so I thought I'd just flash a few quick lists, my top 5 season premieres, my top 5 season finales, and my top 5 Episode 9s. So we'll get to my number one favorite episode of Game of Thrones seasons 1 through 5, and that is The Dance of Dragons. Pros, Daenerys getting ambushed by the Sons of the Harpy in the fighting pits and then getting saved by Drogon, frying people alive, and it ends with her going for a ride on Drogon. Stannis tragically burns his own daughter alive. Doran shows off what a badass he is. Arya trails Meryn Trant while Mace Tyrell sings. Jorah kicks ass in the fighting pits. Cons, Bronn's comedic shenanigans in Dorne. Overall, this episode has two of my favorite scenes in the entire series, and no other episode has not one, but two amazing sequences, and sequences that were amazing in different ways. First one being the burning of Shireen, that I know a lot of people hated, either because they liked Stannis or felt it was really out of character for him. I didn't hate Stannis, but I didn't particularly like him either, and I strongly disagreed that it was out of character for him. I thought it was incredibly in character for him, but most of all, the way they built up to it with the scenes with Davos, and then with Stannis talking to Shireen, where you could tell it was eating him up from the inside, but his desire to win the throne and save the entire world, which he believed he was destined to do, won out over the love of his daughter. And it's such a classic and dramatic scenario. Which would you place first, the love of your daughter or being able to save the world? Seeing how if he failed to save the world it would result in his daughter's death anyway, the choice seems simple. But it's not so simple, as prophecies can always be misleading, which is a concept George R.R. loves to play with, and it was definitely misleading here, which makes it all the more tragic. But the acting, the music, the overall executions of these scenes were so heartbreakingly tragic. Overall, I much preferred it to the Red Wedding, as I was conflicted about the Red Wedding and whether or not it was great storytelling, because, having the Lannister just constantly defeat the Starks over and over and over again, it's not very dynamic storytelling. Here, I wasn't conflicted at all. It was definitely amazing storytelling. So that scene alone made this episode deserve a spot on my top 10 list. But amazingly, in addition to this sequence that was better than the Red Wedding, we got what was, in my humble opinion, bar none, the single best sequence of the entire series, with the events in the fighting pits. Every single moment of this 20-minute sequence was pure gold. First with the witty repartee between Daario, Daenerys, Hizdahr, and Tyrion, and then with Jorah's epic battle in the pits, and then the Sons of the Harpy creepily popping up out of nowhere and started killing everyone, and then with Drogon turning up to burn people alive, and finally with Daenerys finally reforming her bond with her dragons in the most epic way by finally learning how to ride one, while Tyrion watched in awe as she just flew away. The whole sequence was so amazing on so many levels. As soon as I watched this scene, I immediately went back and watched this scene 5 more times in a row, and each time I was just amazed as the first. And all the other sequences in this episode, although weren't amazing, they were very strong and did hold up. I love seeing Tycho Nestoris spar with Mace, and I love the tension of Arya abandoning her mission to follow Meryn Trant, who we learn is even more despicable than we knew. And even the failed Dorne storyline was at its best in this episode, as we finally got to see Doran use some of his negotiating magic. So overall, the best sequences of the entire series, and one of the most tragic sequences of the entire series, as well as many other strong supporting scenes, make this my number one favorite episode of Game of Thrones. So that's it for my top 10 episodes of Game of Thrones seasons 1 through 5. Be sure to check out my many other Game of Thrones videos, and make sure you subscribe for more Game of Thrones videos to come. Thanks a lot for watching.